from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but Thee, dear Lord, none but Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee.
All right. Short reading. Verses 16 and 17. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies. Until the day breathes and the shadows flee, turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on cleft mountains. There's some beautiful poetic language there, some of which I will probably not talk about. But just like that last statement, like a gazelle or a young stag on cleft mountains. Anybody know what that's about? Anybody ever seen what we would call a mountain goat on the side of a mountain? There's a particular breed in a particular part of the world that literally can walk up and down and stand on the side of cliffs that are essentially vertical. It's absolutely mind-blowing to watch it, or even to see still shots of them stand. How they are there is completely mind-blowing. How they can move, they can be standing somewhere and you go, okay, I see where they got a foothold where they are right now, but there's not another foothold anywhere around. What are they going to do? And they will jump and land securely. It is that imagery, that sure-footedness that is being drawn from here. I want my beloved to be like a gazelle or young stag on the cleft of a mountain. In a precarious place, under precarious circumstances, the world, the life in which we live, still sure-footed and able to stand firm. It's that kind of imagery that we don't want to completely miss. But in terms of what we want to focus on in this study, we're going to look at some more important things, because the idea of the fellowship and relationship is really the core idea that is being developed through this section of the book. And so, my beloved is mine, and I am his. What is that all about? Other than sounding good, what's it mean? And you don't have to get all complex in your answer. It can be simple, because mine's going to be simple. They belong to each other. Okay, so there's this mutual belonging that is being confessed, and that's the word I want to use here: confessed. The writer is saying, "My beloved is mine, and I am his." Maybe I should say the speaker is saying, because the writer and the speaker are not exactly the same. This is one of the great covenant statements of this entire book. Covenant relationships are important. In the state of Louisiana, I got married in Texas. Life is a little different in Texas. In the state of Louisiana, marriage is influenced not as much by common law like the rest of the United States, but much more by the Napoleonic Code and its idea of marriage, and much more influenced by a particular religious organization in its views of marriage than other places in our country. In Texas, you live with a person, you call them your wife, you share things. Eventually, the state just recognizes you as married. Whether you went through any of the hoops of the process to get a state sanctioned marriage is a lot less important. Um, Common law marriages have changed a lot. They were very practical in years gone by, not nearly as necessary today, but still recognized in a lot of places. What's unique about Louisiana that I had to learn after I moved over here is Louisiana actually has two levels of marriage, two different types of marriage. They got a marriage that pretty much looks like every marriage across the country. And you go down and you say, I want a marriage license, and that's what you would be talking about, except for what happens in Louisiana when you go down and say, I would like a marriage license. They actually say, well, what kind? Because Louisiana also has what is known as a covenant marriage. And the covenant marriage, if you get a covenant marriage license, there's a lot more process and requirement to dissolve the relationship than in a standard marriage. There are actually statutory requirements of time that has to pass, of actual steps to say, okay, we are separated and then we stay separated for this much time and we still haven't worked out our problems. And so it is still our intention. And all of these milestones have to be met before divorce can be granted. It requires some type of counseling and effort to be made to reconcile and retain the relationship, because they recognize that covenant relationships are not common. And I use common there not in terms of frequency, but common in terms of general, unimportant. Um, it's not like a neighbor who you have a relationship with. Why? Because you happen to have bought property in the same area. And if they decide to move, do they have to come talk to you about moving? No, they have no obligation to you. Now, in some neighborhoods, there are some higher structure to the relationship that does govern how certain disputes are settled and that kind of stuff, but that's another issue. I think you're entering into a deeper kind of relationship when you move into those neighborhoods and sign on to those agreements, saying, yes, I'm going to consider my neighbors before I decide what color I'm going to paint my house, or what kind of landscaping I'm going to put, or where my fences are going to go and what material they're going to be made out of, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we're talking about covenants, we're talking about as deep of a relationship as exists. So much so that God describes marriage as being what? As a single unity. The man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. And that's one of the problems we have in our society at large, is we don't respect the nature of the relationship enough to recognize, hey, it's not my decision about whether or not this union can be divided. What God has joined together, let not man separate. Who governs a division of the union if it happens? The one who joined it, God. But that is not the way that people largely look at the marriage relationship anymore. The marriage relationship is an agreement between two people, And if they decide that they're no longer compatible, well, they just go their separate ways. No harm, no foul. Only that's not the kind of relationship marriage is. And that's the relationship that this book is based on, is this covenant marriage. My beloved is mine and I'm his. This is a statement about neither of us remains or completely stands individual anymore. We're past that. And so it's because of this kind of relationship that in a properly functioning marriage, large choices aren't made without doing what? Consulting with your partner. You don't just decide, I'm going to quit my job today and we're going to move across the country, and then go home and say, by the way, I quit my job today and we're going to move across the country. That doesn't that's not that doesn't represent the nature of the relationship. It's a much deeper relationship than that. And I understand that, therefore, I'm not my own. And what happens to me affects the other party. And this has a lot of different layers that it can be applied. Okay. It's clearly applied in a marriage scenario. Ephesians 5 makes it clear that it applies in the relationship between Christ and the church. And we'll talk about some other layers that we can think about along those times in just a moment. But neither stands completely independent. Each one belongs to the other. That's what's being expressed here. And we have to have this kind of thinking about our spouse. What other relationships in life, in temporal, on earth life, what other relationships rise to this kind of a level? They may not attain the same level, but they do have characteristics in common. There is no equal to it, right? But the familial relationship, families have deeper obligations to one another than non-families, right? And I think everybody inherently realizes that. Whether there's any formal structure, even the government realizes that, because let's say you happen to pass from this life without leaving a will. Now, understand that the state's going to take a big chunk of it for their cut. That's statutorily written into it. But in general, what does the state say is going to be the proper disposal of the rest of your assets? The nearest kin. That is a respective family, that it recognizes that there's organic ties within that kinship. And by the way, if you don't have any children, it could be a niece or a nephew, it could be a brother or a sister, it could be a great niece or nephew, it could be someone that you haven't seen in 40 years, but they're the closest living relative, and so they're more tied to you than anyone else. And so the law says that's where your property goes, to the person that is most closely related to you. By the way, the law of God that was given through Moses did the same kind of thing. If a man died without having offspring, his brother was to raise up an offspring in his name. If you didn't have sons and daughters to inherit your property, the property didn't go to somebody else or to some general. The property went to closest relative. There's a whole story about Ruth and Boaz. And she was redeemed by Boaz. Why? because the closest kinsman to her chose not to redeem her, and he was the next in line. And so we recognize degrees within these relationships. Immediate family is closer than extended family, but any family is closer than non-family. No matter how much you care about somebody, how close you get to them, how much time you spend with them. You may not have seen your nephew in 40 years, and you may have a friend that you went to school with that you talk to every single day and that you travel with and that he's literally your best friend on earth, but the law says what? That familial tie is deeper than just a common friendship. So families fit into this kind of category in a more expanded way beyond the spouse. However, I want to plug this. I know it's not popular when I say it, but I believe it's biblical. The relationship between a man and his wife is the preeminent relationship on earth in his life, even above the relationship between parents and children. The spousal relationship takes a special place. Family relationship has some of the same characteristics. State relationships, national relationships, being a Spaniard or an American or a Brit, there's some connection between those relationships that extend beyond being part of the general human race. What about local churches? Do we have unique responsibilities? And is that a deeper relationship than we have with brethren that we're not in direct fellowship with? Absolutely. Does it rise to the level of family? Does it rise to the level of a spouse? No, but it has some of the same characteristics, and we have responsibilities and obligations within it that should not be taken for granted. And so, if someone sins, that is not associated with me in any way, shape, or form, what obligation do I have to that person? I have no greater obligation than I have to everyone anyway, which is to do what? Exemplify righteousness and preach the truth. But if someone whom I'm in fellowship with is practicing sin and I become aware of it, what are my obligations to that individual? To go to them and to seek to do what? Restore them into their proper relationship with God and proper relationship with me. What if they refuse? Okay, so we get other people involved to try to make the case. What if they still refuse? There's the withholding of fellowship with the goal of what? Restoration and reconciliation of fellowship. The fellowship's already been severed. So it's really just saying, okay, we need to make these lines clear. You are not in fellowship with us. You are not walking according to the pattern. And so we're not going to pretend like you are until you make correction. And then when someone corrects, there's what? Full and complete restoration of fellowship. That is very different than our obligations to people that are not in fellowship with us. Even brethren in Christ who are not in fellowship with us. If there's another congregation in town and somebody over there is doing something wrong, do I have any unique responsibilities as their brother in Christ to do any of that stuff? Do I have any fellowship even to withdraw from? And the answer is no. We don't always look at it that way. We blur those lines sometimes, but we have to be clear that these kind of relationships that we're talking about holds some special obligations of care and maintaining and working on and preservation of, and they should not be easily discarded. When a brother departs from the relationship, should it be a, oh well, that was his choice, or should it be a, let's go look and see if we can find them? So we got to think about that. Our relationship to Christ is certainly such a relationship. And the thing about all of these that we've talked about here, and there may be others that we could talk about, but the thing about all of these is that they are all, to one degree or another, or in one aspect of another, one body type relationships. The two shall become one. There's some kind of joining to where it functions now as an independent unit. The relationship itself becomes an independent unit. That's different than the individual alone. Um, that is what we're talking about, and that is the implication of my beloved is mine and I am his. This is moved beyond desire. This has now gotten to a point in which there is deep connection and association, and such of the kind that for one to be hurt, all are hurt. This is why my sin matters, because my sin doesn't just affect me, it affects everyone associated with me. And it doesn't just affect men, it affects Christ, because we're one body with Christ. And so now all of a sudden, I can't say of a sin, well, I didn't hurt anybody, because I understand that it inherently affects the people around me because of the nature of our fellowship, the nature of our relationship. Um, these one body type of relationships. Same is true with families. I used to tell my kids when they were little, listen, you wear the family name of Green. When you leave and go out and interact with people, live up to the name. Which, by the way, in some circles may not be as high of a standard as others. I don't know. But live up to the name. And understand that your behavior reflects back on this house. And that decisions about your brothers and sister are decisions about your parents are being derived because of your association with the family. That same is true with the local church. We wear the name of Christ. That is, listen, if you don't think the way we live, speak, and act and treat people affects the way people they view Jesus, you're not talking to enough people. Because they'll tell you right quick that they don't want to have any part in God if that's what he's like. It's why it matters so much. These are deep, inseparable relationships. When you tear them apart, that is what you are doing. You are tearing them. It's not an easy separation. It's the difference between holding something together with spit and holding something together with liquid nails. I can take two pieces of wood, put a little water on them, stick them together, and they might hold together, and I can take them apart, and you can't tell they were ever put together. I'll tell you, if I put a half a tube of liquid nails between them, they're coming off in splinters. They're not coming off as whole things. That's what we're talking about when we talk about separating things that are joined this tightly. You can't move one without destroying the other. Covenant progressively unites. The confession that is made at the opening of these two verses anticipates the later declaration. Where is that at? Well, it comes later. I am his, in language like that, that's used throughout this book. I am my beloved's. That language increasingly emphasizes shared identity, mutual devotion, connected outcome. What happens for one happens for all. Uh, even in popular literature, this kind of relationship is discussed. Famously, the Three Musketeers. What's the mantra, the motto of the Three Musketeers? Which, by the way, could become four, but that's another story. All for one and one for all. The King Arthur legend, the Knights of the Round Table. It's all of them. We even practically do this, at least in word, in political things on the earth today. All the NATO nations supposedly function under the motto of what? An attack on one is an attack on all. Because we have entered into a covenant agreement with these people that we are going to work together to preserve and defend the sovereignty of all. It's that same exact kind of relationship. And when you do damage to one part, you are effectively doing damage to the whole. That's a very different way of looking at my behavior than most people look at their behavior. Most of us think that as long as I'm doing it by myself and it doesn't involve the other party, well, then it's my choice. We actually have cute little labels for that kind of stuff too, right? My body, my choice. It's not your decision. It's my decision. It doesn't affect you. It affects me. Listen, it affects everyone that is intimately associated with you. It affects your creator. So this growing and progressive unification, that is what this is doing, and it's ultimately working toward a completed union, what it's actually supposed to appear like. And from the gospel story standpoint of things, what is that? I'm sorry? The relationship between God and Christ and between the church. What is ultimately going to happen with the church? Christ is going to return. We're going to be raised, and we're going to do what? Go to be with him. The intent is not the relationship we share with him now. He's preparing a place for us so that we can eventually have complete fellowship, be in his very presence, dwell with him. That's what the goal is. And that idea of completed union is what this is moving toward. It starts off with a desire, and it grows and it grows and it grows until there is this inseparable union that is the purpose. The longing still remains there until the cool of the day. Still want to be there. The relationship is genuine, but complete or full enjoyment still lies ahead. And so this chapter closes with hopeful expectation rather than with complete fulfillment. We're still expecting more. So as we look at this, we've expanded on the themes that were introduced in chapter 1: the invitation, the fellowship, the mutual delight in one another, the covenant, the shared identity, the faithfulness, the hope, the anticipation. It's all there. It's increasing, but it's not fully mature yet. Let's make some connections to the gospel story. Now, again, I want to make very clear that we want to do this without forcing individual symbols into direct prophecy. This is prophesying. That's not the goal. I don't even believe that's a proper use of this book. I don't see this as an idea for idea, or thought for thought, or word for word, or word picture for word picture, even allegory. Instead, it's using one relationship to describe another similar relationship. So we don't want to force individual symbols in here, but we want to notice that the same covenant movement is unfolding. And so in chapter 2 of the Song of Solomon, beauty is recognized within the covenant. You are the most beautiful. You're a standout among the lilies of the field. You're head and shoulders among your peers. The bridegroom comes seeking fellowship. He comes to her, and an invitation is extended, and then the warning that that fellowship must be guarded and protected. And then what we've spent most of the class today talking about so far: my beloved is mine and I am his. That nature. So we've got this present fellowship that is anticipating even a greater union between the two. Now that's the flow of this chapter. What about the gospel story? Well, Christ beautifies his redeemed people as they are conformed to his image. The relationship itself begets beauty. We are made more beautiful as we are made more in his image. And that's the way he sees us. He doesn't see us the way that we see ourselves, as damaged goods. And again, that's where this started, right? She says, well, I know I have to work in the fields, and I've got this wrinkled, tan body that you, and the bridegroom says, I don't know what you're talking about. You're the most beautiful woman among women. And that develops our beauty. And as the relationship grows, we become even more beautiful and more valuable. Proverbs 31. What's the value of a virtuous woman? Her price is far above rubies. Christ came seeking the lost. The bridegroom came seeking fellowship. So does Christ. The gospel calls for us to respond. An invitation is extended. Christians are to abide faithfully in Christ. Fellowship has to be guarded. You can't take it for granted. There are a lot of people out there who will tell you, I am a Christian, and then they live however they want to live. But they are a Christian because something that happened to them at some point in their life that they think made them a Christian. And now it doesn't matter anymore what they're doing. They're still a Christian. They're not guarding the fellowship. Covenant relationship brings mutual belonging between Christ and his people. He is the head, we are the body. My beloved is mine, and I am his. He is my head, I am his body. Can something happen to your body that doesn't affect your head? And the answer is no. It can't. Something can't happen to us that doesn't affect him. Can something happen to your head that doesn't affect your body? No. Present fellowship anticipates greater union is how we ended Song of Solomon 2. The church awaits the marriage supper of the Lamb. End of Revelation, right? That's what's there. We haven't had it yet, but we're anticipating it, and we're moving toward it. We're readying ourselves. And as Jesus taught, when the bridegroom comes, if you're not ready, what happens? You get left out. The greatest beauty in the Song of Solomon is ultimately found in this covenant relationship. Whether the opening imagery originally describes the bride of the bridegroom in this chapter doesn't matter. The poetry quickly directs the attention toward the relationship itself. That is where we need to focus. And marriage joins two lives into one. Throughout the song, that union is increasingly evident as the focus. And that is the way we should think of our relationship with God. It is a marriage that cannot be separated. And it means that I cannot act independent on my own. For you are not your own. You have been bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body. Why glorify God? Why does the world glorify God when they see my good works? Because we're one. And we reflect the other. Practical application. You want one? There it is. I don't care if not a member of this body is around you and nobody around you is a Christian, and your action is never going to be known by anyone who cares. You are inseparably joined to Christ. And it inherently affects him and reflects on him, the kind of person you are. So you are always honest, and you are always fair, and you are always just, and you are always righteous in every respect. No matter what. You're always faithful, even if you think your spouse is never going to find out. All right, got to stop. Just be prepared next time to move into chapter 3. And like I said, we'll probably start moving at a much faster clip. But I wanted to really establish this relationship stuff.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea.